Dad stumbled awkwardly but managed to walk down the aisle. He looked Robert, the groom, straight in the eye.
"Take care of my daughter."
Dad's eyes clearly conveyed the message, even if he didn't speak the words. "I promise to protect Nancy for the rest of my life." Robert understood Dad's feelings and responded with determination. "I wish Mom could see me in my wedding dress from heaven. I lost Mom to cancer when I was in elementary school. Since then, Dad raised me and my two sisters as a single father." The wedding reception went smoothly, and finally, I read a letter to my parents-in-law. "Daniel and Karen have always been kind to me. I lost my mom to illness when I was young. Because of that, I might have always longed for a mother in my heart. You two have welcomed me warmly, like your own daughter." At that moment, the lights went out, and the entire room was plunged into darkness. Thinking it was a technical issue, I looked up to see the doors open, revealing a bright light and a smiling woman's face. "Mom. My name is Nancy, a 31-year-old office worker about to get married. I lost my mom when I was young. When I was in 3rd grade, Mom was diagnosed with cancer. At that time, I couldn't grasp the gravity of a parent getting sick. I just thought it was a bit lonely because the house felt quieter than usual when I got home from school. Dad ran a long-established auto repair shop in our town. He would leave the work to his young employees and take me to visit Mom in the hospital every day." "You came here again? Thank you. How was school?" Mom's gentle face was always the same, even in the hospital. I learned much later that Mom was undergoing chemotherapy, losing her hair, and it was painful just to sit up. Still, she forced a smile to keep me from worrying. Dad would inform Mom ahead of our visits. "We're coming." So, Mom would put on a wig and lightly apply makeup before we arrived. In my memories, Mom was always beautiful and bright. "Mom, get well soon. We have a class visit next week. I hope you're better by then." "Yes, and you be good with your sisters and don't fight with your friends." "Of course. I have homework, so I need to go now." I thought these ordinary exchanges would continue forever, but 2 weeks later, Mom passed away. Dad was so busy with the funeral arrangements and relatives that he had no time to grieve. "Why is everyone wearing black clothes?" "Mom is sleeping a lot. Why won't she wake up?" My twin sisters asked innocently, and I didn't know how to answer, so I remained silent. From that day on, whenever Dad was busy with work, I tried to act as a substitute mom for my sisters. Despite his exhaustion from work, Dad would always say, "Is there anything I can do?" "I'll do anything." He took on the house chores willingly. After washing his dirty socks by hand, Dad looked at Mom's portrait and said, "Mom had it tough every day. I realize that now." But I couldn't bring myself to smile at Dad's efforts. When I was in junior high, Dad tried to iron my uniform with clumsy hands. "I can do it myself. Don't touch it." I snatched the iron from him. On my birthday, Dad made beef stew. "Don't bother. Mom's beef stew was never this bad." I ran to my room, ignoring my hunger. Later, I snuck out to check on Dad and saw him eating the stew he made. "Barbara, what should I do?" Dad asked Mom's portrait, his back looking heartbreakingly small. Still, I couldn't face Dad openly. Every time Dad forced a smile, it painfully reminded me that Mom was gone. Since Mom passed, I never saw Dad shed a tear. Watching Dad struggle while pretending to be strong was unbearable, and I started avoiding him. In high school, I used my sisters as an excuse to cut off social interactions with friends. Eventually, no one invited me anymore, and my only company was my sisters.
"This is fine. I'm fine with this."
Without relying on others or interacting with them, I began to believe it was normal to do everything alone. After high school, I gave up college to help with the family finances and got a job at a local company. Sorry. If I earned more, you wouldn't have to struggle, Nancy. Dad lamented his inadequacies as a father. I didn't get a job for you, Dad. I replied coldly, avoiding proper conversation with him. Though I felt guilty, I couldn't muster the courage to face Dad. 10 years passed, and my sisters found jobs. By then, I was 30. Colleagues teased me. Any plans to get married? I gave up on that long ago. I always laughed it off. The only man who invited me to dinner was Robert, a colleague who joined the company at the same time. I've been interested in you since I started working here. Thinking about you at work keeps me motivated and performing well. Please go out with me, with marriage in mind. After dinner, Robert's sudden confession surprised me. But it also made me happy. I had only ever thought about my sisters and never seriously considered my own life. I never imagined my heart could flutter like this. The excitement lasted for days, and I couldn't sleep. At work, seeing Robert distracted me. Hey, you're not working. And my colleagues noticed my distraction. I confided my confusing feelings to my sisters. Nancy! You finally fell in love. Who's the guy? Is he handsome? Tell us more about him. They eagerly probed, and I was taken aback. He must be handsome. Yeah, your face hasn't stopped smiling. You didn't realize, did you? With their observation, I realized my feelings for Robert were love. I accepted his proposal. 6 months later, after a fireworks show, Robert proposed again. I look forward to our future together. I tearfully accepted. Mom, is it okay for me to be happy? To live my own life? I gazed at my engagement ring under the night sky, reassuring myself of my happiness. As fall deepened and the leaves turned, I nervously visited Robert's parents. Relax. My parents aren't as strict as you think. Robert's parents were both public servants. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Are you Nancy? Oh my. I see. You're Robert's fiancé. This must be fate. After my introduction, my parents-in-law looked at me with shining eyes. Hey, stop staring at her. It's rude. Sorry. We're just thrilled to have such a wonderful woman with Robert. Forgive us, Nancy. Indeed. Robert inherited my non-existent charm with women. It's a miracle someone as lovely as you would marry him. Enough with the jokes, you too. You're embarrassing me. As Robert said, his parents were friendly and easygoing. I felt I could get along well with them. Then the doorbell rang, and Karen went to answer it. They're here. The house became lively as more people arrived. Oh, you're Robert's future wife? An older woman, who looked like Daniel, entered. Sorry to startle you. This is my sister Linda. Daniel apologized with a sigh. Soon, more relatives filled the room, making it crowded. This is Anthony, a university professor. And Jennifer, whose husband was elected to the city council last month. What was supposed to be a greeting turned into a family gathering. Seeing me overwhelmed, Robert gently held my hand. Are you okay? We can rest in the next room if you need. No way. Everyone took time off to meet you. The main guest can't leave. How rude. The relatives laughed loudly, and Robert sighed. Oh, speaking of manners, women must have children after marriage. How old are you? I'm 30. Oh dear. If you're planning to have kids, you should hurry. Linda, stop it. Imposing your views isn't right these days. Daniel complained with a grim expression. That's not true. All of my relatives had kids in their 20s. If Nancy wants to be accepted as part of this family, she needs to show results. Understood. I'll do my best. Linda, leading the relatives, said whatever they pleased and left with satisfied expressions. On their way out, I'm sorry, Nancy. Robert apologized. Were you surprised? I didn't nod or shake my head, but inside I was bewildered. You'll have to deal with people like them more often, but they're not bad at heart. So, when we get married, I want you to live here with my parents. I understand. I intended to do that when I agreed to marry you. I forced a smile to hide my true feelings. From that day on, I started visiting my in-laws' house every weekend for wedding planning, trying to fit in with the family. Each time, the relatives would come over in what they called bridal training. There will be many city council members among the guests. Make sure to think carefully about the food and wedding favors. Don't be stingy with money. Understood? They spoke to me as if scolding an unruly child. When Christmas came, far more relatives than I had anticipated showed up at my in-laws' house every day. Nancy, you know this, right? Think of this as the final test before marrying Robert. The morning after Christmas, I felt a bit feverish but still took the initiative to serve and help with the food. No matter how hard I tried to act before being told, Linda and the others never praised me. Even so, I wanted to be accepted as a member of the family as soon as possible. Reflecting on the days I spent taking care of my younger sisters during my youth, I kept telling myself,
I can endure this much.
However, as I was about to head to the kitchen to serve coffee to new visitors, my vision blurred, and I found myself staring at the wooden ceiling. Nancy! Get a hold of yourself! Hey, Nancy has collapsed. Oh my goodness! Robert, call an ambulance right away! My parents-in-law's frantic voices gradually faded away. When I woke up, I saw the white ceiling of a hospital room. Nancy? Oh, thank goodness, you're awake. Karen said, tearing up by my side. What happened to me? I couldn't immediately understand why I had been taken to the hospital. It seems you were mentally exhausted. The doctor said you should recover soon if you rest for a while. I see. I'm sorry for causing trouble. Ashamed of troubling my parents-in-law, I tried to get up. No. Rest now. Absolutely no pushing yourself. Karen, speaking like a scolding mom, gently pushed me back onto the bed. Why did you push yourself so hard? If you were feeling unwell, you should have said so. I wanted to be accepted as a member of the family as soon as possible. But I guess I'm not doing very well, am I? Hearing this, Karen started to say something, but then the hospital room door opened. Nancy, are you awake? How do you feel? I'm really sorry for causing trouble. What are you talking about? You're not causing trouble. Just think about yourself for now. Thank you. The warmth of my parents-in-law's words touched my heart. Earlier, I firmly told Linda to stop meddling in our family matters. She's very sorry now. Family. That's right. Nancy, you're already a part of our family. There's no need to worry. Daniel smiled. Exactly. To us, you are like a real daughter. Yet you seem so formal with us. I'm sorry. That's it. You always become so formal with us. It seems you feel like there's a barrier between us. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful. There you go again. Karen smiled wryly, as if exasperated. Just then, Robert came in. All the relatives have left. They've all realized they put too much pressure on Nancy. As I listened to Robert talk about Linda and the other relatives, my heavy heart began to feel lighter. They're really not as bad as you think, Nancy. Yes. I'll try to get along with everyone as soon as possible. To do that, Nancy, be honest with your feelings. Don't be too formal with us. We're family. That's right, Nancy. From now on, think of us as your real family. Feel free to consult with us about anything. Don't try to handle everything on your own. Moved by my parents-in-law's warm words, I couldn't hold back my tears. Karen gently hugged me, stroking my head like a real daughter. Karen, please teach me how to make your delicious soup. When I was discharged, I decided to treat Karen like a real mom. Of course. I'll teach you our family's secret recipe. Let's make it together. With Daniel, I was initially unsure how to interact, not having faced a real dad before. Relax and take it easy. Think of me as Karen's servant. Daniel joked with a smile, making me less nervous. When Linda came over and saw me, she asked, "How are you feeling? Are you okay now?" Showing genuine concern. Thank you for your concern. I'm okay now. Good. That's a relief. Linda patted her chest in genuine relief, though she didn't apologize directly as she was leaving. Use this. She handed me a discount voucher for a nearby cafe. As Robert said, deep down, everyone was kind-hearted. After finishing the soup and cleaning up, my parents-in-law called me to their room. When I entered, there were several cardboard boxes containing old photo albums. Oh, here it is. Karen, look, everyone's so young. Nancy, take a look. Daniel opened an album and showed me an old, yellowed photo. In it were a young Daniel and Karen, and to my surprise, I let out a voice of surprise. What? To two unexpected people. Is that my dad and mom? I exclaimed, recognizing their faces. Yes, that's your dad and mom. How? How did you know each other? Daniel and your dad, David, were classmates in middle school. They drifted apart due to work after getting married. Wow. That's so unexpected. And now I can tell you, it was me who introduced Barbara to David, who wasn't good with women. Karen laughed, reminiscing. Daniel pulled out a rusty cookie tin from the closet. These are all letters David wrote to us. The envelopes and letters had faded with time, but the familiar handwriting was undoubtedly my dad's. The letters dated from just after my mom's passing to just after my engagement to Robert, totaling over 50.
I never knew Dad wrote so many letters.
I was surprised by this side of Dad, who I thought wasn't much of a letter writer. 1 week before Barbara passed, we visited her. She was instructing David on cooking, cleaning, and laundry. I never knew that. David had always left the housework to Barbara, focusing on his job. He was frantically taking notes from Barbara. Karen's voice, mixed with laughter, turned somber. After Barbara passed, David struggled. Nancy, he felt you wouldn't open up to him. He was always clumsy. After Barbara died, he must have been worried about how to connect with his daughters. But Nancy, believe this, David always put you and your sisters first. Dad. I'm sorry. I knew Dad had tried hard for us. But I couldn't be honest with him, always rebelling. The latest letter simply said, in large letters, "Take care of my daughter." Beside the words was a smudge. David must have been so happy. Imagining you in your wedding dress, he must have written that letter with tears in his eyes. I thought from the bottom of my heart how grateful I was to be born as Dad and Mom's daughter. And then summer came, and the wedding day arrived. According to my sisters, Dad was so nervous from the morning that he couldn't eat breakfast. Dad kept looking at Mom's portrait and repeatedly prayed, "Please let the wedding go smoothly." "Dad, that outfit doesn't suit you at all. Is it your size? Have you gained a little weight? Your pants aren't going to rip during the ceremony, are they? Enough, you guys. I need to go to the restroom." Watching Dad and my sisters interact, I casually remembered when Mom was still healthy. If only there was one more person here, how wonderful it would have been if Mom could be here too.
I wish I could have shown my wedding dress to Mom in heaven.
The ceremony began, and Dad, with a hesitant step that almost made him stumble, managed to walk down the aisle. He looked straight into Robert, the groom's eyes.
"Take care of my daughter."
Though he didn't voice it, Dad's eyes clearly said it. "I promise to protect Nancy for life," Robert responded with strong words. Then the ceremony and wedding reception proceeded smoothly, and it was time for me to read my letter. "Daniel and Karen have always been kind to me. I lost my real mom to illness when I was in elementary school. So, perhaps I always longed for a mom in my heart. Both of you welcomed me warmly as if I were your own daughter." At that moment, the lights in the venue suddenly went out, and the room was enveloped in darkness. I thought it was a power outage, but then the doors in front opened, and a giant screen lit up with a bright light, showing a woman smiling brightly. "Huh? Mom." The image was of my late mom. "Is it recording properly? Are you filming this?" "Yes, it's working. I think. Which button do I press?" I heard Dad's voice, unchanged from the present. "David, get it together." "Oh, Nancy. Can you hear me?" Mom in the video waved at me with a beautiful smile. "Is Dad doing the housework properly? He's not slacking off, is he? Are the kids studying diligently? Dad is clumsy, so he might be causing trouble for the kids, but please take care of yourself and do your best at work." From the family seats, Dad shouted, "I'm doing just fine without you telling me." And the venue burst into laughter. "And Nancy, if you're watching this video, does that mean a wonderful prince is by your side now? Nancy, congratulations on your wedding. Groom, thank you for marrying Nancy. Since Nancy chose you, I'm sure you're a wonderful man. Groom, please take good care of Nancy for a long time." "I will," Robert promised firmly. "And to the groom's parents, I have a request. My daughter has no mother, so there may be shortcomings. But please watch over her warmly. By the time this video is played, I won't be in this world. But my only wish is for Nancy to be happy. Please fulfill that wish for me. I'm counting on you." Mom's voice trembled with tears. "Nancy, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely be happy. I'll always be watching over you from heaven." Dad's face filled the screen as he filmed. "I'll take care of our daughter." With Dad's strong words, the video ended. When the lights came back on, Robert stood up. He took a deep breath and, facing my mom in heaven, said, "I promise to make Nancy happy. No matter what happens, I will always protect Nancy." The venue erupted in applause and cheers, and the wedding reception ended. My parents-in-law came to the waiting room. Actually, Barbara entrusted us with that video when she was alive. She asked us to show it when her daughter got married. But we never imagined the groom would be our Robert. Daniel and Karen laughed heartily. Having become Robert's wife, I moved in with my in-laws, and now we live together like a real family. Since then, with my in-laws' support, I've made it a point to visit my parents' house once a month. The house, which became surprisingly quiet after the 3 daughters left, welcomed me with Dad, whose hair had thinned a bit, smiling awkwardly. I haven't prepared anything, but I can make some tea. As Dad boiled coffee in the kitchen. Don't be so formal, we're family, I said, rubbing his shoulders. Nancy. For you to say that to me. Dad seemed to have become more emotional with age. And guess what? I'm pregnant. By this time next year, you'll be a grandpa. Even such trivial conversations made Dad sob. Overwhelmed with emotion, I couldn't help but cry too. Both Dad and I, and my in-laws, are eagerly awaiting the day when a new family member joins us. Mom, watch over us from heaven. I'm going to build a family as happy as yours. And Mom's portrait smiled gently as always. Hey, housekeeper. I've invited my celebrity friends over, so make them feel welcome. I was told this by my son's wife Linda, and I wondered how to respond. With guests already here, arguing wasn't an option. Thinking this, I remained calm, which seemed to surprise Linda. She probably expected me to retort in some way. Ignoring that, I carried the finished meal to the living room. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Rebecca, the housekeeper. I said this with a smile as I entered, but I was shocked to see the faces of the surrounding celebrities. And it wasn't just me who was surprised. The celebrities who saw me started murmuring among themselves. Then, one of them confronted Linda. How come she is the one doing this? I can't believe she's a housekeeper. Linda, what's the meaning of this? 3 minutes later, my son, Anthony's return would cost Linda everything. My name is Rebecca. Last spring, as I turned 65, I retired and am now not working. Having lost my husband early, I raised my eldest son, Anthony, on my own. Anthony, who is now 39, got married 6 months ago. Since then, I've been living comfortably alone in a condominium. Freed from work and family obligations, I thought it was time to enjoy my own life. But reality was not so kind. The problem was my daughter-in-law. Linda, Anthony's wife, is 27, comes from a decently good family. Anthony, who has always been shy, had never dated a woman before. He met Linda at a singles mixer he was invited to by a friend. I'm not well-versed in current marriage customs, but Anthony, who had become an associate professor in his late 30s, attended a party limited to men with an annual income of over $80,000. Therefore, many women there were proactive in approaching men, even those significantly older than themselves. For the shy Anthony, being approached by younger women must have been flattering. But as a mother, I had my reservations about this unnatural way of meeting. Yet, seeing Anthony introduce Linda with a happy face, I couldn't bring myself to show displeasure. With that, I decided to warmly accept Anthony's marriage. However, Linda, raised as a young lady, turned out to be incapable of doing anything. Because of her, I would be severely inconvenienced later on. My headaches over Linda began just before the wedding. It was on the day of a dinner with both families when I found myself alone with her in the restroom. I smiled when our eyes met. However, she had a mean smirk on her face. "How did you find my parents?" she said. "Very nice parents," I replied calmly. "It is not like that." But Linda retorted with a look that said she meant something else. "My parents run a company, so we're of a different class. They're paying for the house we'll live in the most upscale neighborhood around here, you see," she boasted proudly. I knew from Anthony that her parents were building them a new house. Still, I wasn't pleased with her condescending look. I couldn't help but respond in kind. It seems so. I'll also contribute financially as much as I can. She snorted and smirked again. You don't have to strain yourself. You're not working, so you couldn't possibly afford it, right? Linda had a way of being offensive with her words. I wanted to reply, but she left the restroom and went to Anthony, who was waiting outside, with a flattering voice. Seeing Anthony smile happily, I realized I couldn't disturb his happiness, having found it so late in life. So, I chose to stay silent, thinking Linda probably just disliked me, potentially her future mother-in-law. If you are truly in love, Anthony, things will work out. That's what I believed, so I decided not to interfere with their marriage and to keep my distance from the newlyweds. However, as soon as their married life began, the troubles started. Linda, who was clueless about everything, would call my mobile phone first thing in the morning, not knowing how to use the washing machine. Despite explaining over the phone, she couldn't grasp it, so I had no choice but to rush over to her place. Rebecca, you came. Can you please do the laundry right away? Although I only came to explain how to use the washing machine, Linda dumped all the laundry on me, and then even demanded I clean. Linda didn't know how to use not only the washing machine but also the vacuum cleaner. Even as I tried to show her how, she just watched TV, ignoring me. When I tried to scold her, she sensed it and fled to the restroom, staying there for 30 minutes, leaving me to do the cleaning. Since then, Linda would call me over during weekdays when Anthony was not home, dumping all household chores on me without a word of thanks. In fact, she would say terrible things. Rebecca, you're always so free, you might as well do this. It's not like you've given us any money for the house like my parents. She would say this and then leave to enjoy her social life with the ladies in the neighborhood. Moreover, she bragged to everyone that our house had a housekeeper, so she didn't have to do any housework. I was furious at her attitude. Linda, don't you think that's a bit too much? I'm here out of kindness, understanding you're struggling with unfamiliar chores. Even as I said this, her attitude remained unchanged, lounging on the living room sofa, acting high and mighty. What? Acting all important just because you're a housekeeper? If you dare tell Anthony about this, I won't let you off easily. I'll tell Anthony you've been harassing me. How twisted could she be? I regretted not opposing their marriage from the start. She would summon me and then, before Anthony returned in the evening, send me away. This routine continued daily, and I was fed up. Then one day, as usual, I received an early morning call from Linda. But today, she seemed panicked. What's wrong? You seem in a hurry. When I asked, she replied in a troubled voice. Today, I'm hosting my birthday party at our place. I was actually calling for my mom to help, but she just told me she can't make it. Come quickly. Apparently, she had planned to have her mother prepare for her birthday party. But now that she couldn't come, Linda wanted me to take over instead. Well, expecting to be called for chores anyway, I was prepared. So, I'm your mom's substitute? Got it. I'll be there shortly. Oh, wait. I haven't prepared anything for the meal. Make sure to buy some ingredients on your way, will you? Yes. Knowing Linda, the kitchen would have nothing. I bought ingredients from an early opening supermarket before heading over to help her. Linda scrutinized each item I bought, checking prices and ingredients. It's a party. I wished you had bought something nicer. Well, no choice now. Hurry up with the preparations. As usual, without thanking me for the groceries, she treated me like a housekeeper. Resigned to my fate, I began the preparations without complaining. While she didn't lift a finger to help, focusing instead on her makeup. After a while, her friends arrived at our house. Since I was still preparing the meal in the back, Linda greeted them at the door by herself. "Everyone, welcome to my birthday party. I've prepared lots of delicacies, so please enjoy yourselves." Despite her attitude towards me, Linda entertained her friends with an air of celebrity, completely different from how she treated me. Listening from the back, I could hear her voice clearly, speaking in a key 2 octaves higher than usual, almost making me laugh. As I prepared the meal, I listened to their voices. Then, I overheard a conversation that sent chills down my spine. "Is the housekeeper cooking again today?" "Yes. She'll do anything if you ask. But don't expect much in terms of taste. She's a terrible housekeeper." Hearing Linda's words, her friends all laughed. I knew she was telling her friends I was the housekeeper, but to call me a terrible one was too much. Despite doing all the chores without complaint, this was unfair treatment. Linda, getting carried away, continued to badmouth me. "Really, our housekeeper is so sloppy with cleaning, and she doesn't even make the laundry fluffy. She's the worst." "Then why not get a new housekeeper? I can introduce you to a good one." "No, thank you. Our household isn't as wealthy as yours. We can barely afford our current bottom-of-the-barrel housekeeper." Listening to this ridiculous exchange was truly absurd. Yet, hearing her speak ill of me so casually made me want to confront her. As Linda finished talking with her friends, she entered the kitchen and addressed me in the most arrogant tone imaginable. "Hey, housekeeper. I've invited my celebrity friends over, so entertain them." I thought about how to respond to her. With guests already here, arguing wasn't an option. Despite my anger reaching its peak, I replied with a smile. "I understand. You're lucky to have such refined friends." Linda, perhaps taken aback by my response, stood with her mouth open. She probably expected me to retaliate in some way. Ignoring that, I carried the prepared meal to the living room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am Rebecca, the housekeeper." I said this with a smile as I entered, but I was surprised by the celebrities' reactions. And it wasn't just me who was surprised. The celebrities who saw me also started murmuring among themselves. Then, one of them confronted her. "Why is she the one doing this? I can't believe she's a housekeeper. Linda, what's going on?" When one of celebrity questioned her, the others looked at her with skepticism. Linda stood frozen, looking as if she had been deceived.
Huh? What? What's everyone's problem?
The celebs ignored Linda's question and turned their attention to me. "It's been a long time, Professor Rebecca." "Everyone, it's been a while. I never imagined we'd meet like this. Despite having such a terrible daughter-in-law, I suppose I should be thankful." I said this to them, making it clear I was addressing Linda. Realizing I was Linda's mother-in-law, everyone glared at her. Linda, caught lying, looked uncomfortable. "Linda, isn't it disrespectful to call such a wonderful mother-in-law a housekeeper? She was our professor during college." "Yes. Since retiring, she has been awarded the title of Professor Emeritus, a well-respected individual in this area." "Linda, weren't you aware?" Hearing this from everyone, Linda was stunned and speechless. Understandably so. Until now, she thought I was just an unemployed old woman. In this high-end residential area, education has always been a priority, with numerous prestigious tutoring schools. Even daughters from good families attending state universities wasn't uncommon. Many of the young celebrity wives here today are graduates of the state university where I taught. Unlike them, Linda graduated from a private university in the city, unaware of my reputation. I apologized to my former students for the discomfort caused. Sorry, everyone. My son's wife started living in this neighborhood without knowing anything. When I said that, Linda glared at me with an expression that said, "Don't be stupid." About 3 minutes later, Anthony came home. Well, to be precise, he had been home for about 10 minutes but had quietly gone to his room. Linda, who normally wouldn't expect Anthony to be home at this time, was panicking. "Anthony? Why are you home so early?" Facing a jittery Linda, Anthony calmly answered, "It's your birthday today, the first one since we got married." I came home early, but I didn't feel it was the right moment to come out, so I waited in the room for about 10 minutes. "If you were coming home early, you should have told me in advance," Linda said, sweating nervously. Probably, Anthony intended to surprise her by coming home early. Given what was overheard, it's understandable why he didn't come out. Tentatively peering at Anthony, Linda asked,
Did you hear the voices?"
"I heard everything. Even from outside, it was clear you were calling my mother a housekeeper." Linda's face went pale upon hearing Anthony's words. Then, turning to me with a voice on the verge of tears, she asked, "Rebecca, did you know he was home? Why didn't you tell me?" Linda looked at me with pleading eyes, perhaps hoping for some way to deflect the situation. However, no matter how much she pleaded, I had no intention of helping. "Well, I did think I heard some noise at the entrance while I was preparing the meal. But I was too busy to notice." I said so, but the truth was, I clearly knew he had come home. He had entered just as Linda was bad-mouthing me. So, I looked at Anthony and silently gestured for him to be quiet by placing a finger on my lips. That's why he quietly went into the bedroom without Linda noticing. I wondered how he felt, listening to all of Linda's insults about me alone in the room. As I feared, he seemed shocked. With a sad expression, Anthony then said to Linda, "Linda, I knew my mother was coming over to do chores almost every day. I could tell by the way things were cleaned, the way the laundry was folded, and the taste of the food." Linda, hearing this, awkwardly looked down. It seemed she was too embarrassed to make excuses now. He continued, "I'm not upset that you asked her to help with chores. I thought you were getting along with her. But to exploit her, calling her a housekeeper and then bad-mouthing her? I never thought you were that kind of person." Linda seemed to reflect on his words. However, suddenly, she lifted her head and turned towards her friends. Then, an unbelievable answer came back from Linda's mouth. "Rebecca didn't contribute financially to our house like my parents did. I thought it was because she was poor, so I told her not to bother. How sneaky to hide that she was a university professor." Linda, even now, tried to paint me as the villain. Feeling the need to correct her, I raised my voice. "No, I wasn't hiding anything." "That's right. When I introduced you to her, she had already retired. We didn't think it necessary to mention her past job. Saying she was a university professor might sound like bragging, right?" We explained. Yet, Linda was not satisfied and refused to back down. "I don't want to hear such excuses. It's as if I was made a fool of for not knowing. If I had known, I wouldn't have called her a housekeeper." Linda insisted she was embarrassed because she had been unaware. She had predetermined I was poor and had exploited me accordingly. It seemed she hadn't reflected on what Anthony had said earlier. Finally, Anthony lost his patience and raised his voice. "Linda, what does it matter if my mother wasn't a professor? Judging people by your own standards like that, you're no longer my wife. We're getting a divorce. Please leave." At the word divorce, Linda flinched momentarily but then retorted with a defiant attitude. "Fine, I understand. But since my parents built this house, Anthony, you should be the one to leave." Linda declared this, then closed the front door behind her and left. Presumably, she went back to her parents' house to complain. "Wait a second, the money for this house was..." Anthony tried to call out to the departing Linda, but it was too late. "It's okay, Anthony. She'll understand soon enough." I reassured him, and Anthony calmed down, saying, "Well, yeah." After all, the divorce seemed inevitable, so Linda would lose everything. It wouldn't take long for her to realize that. What concerned me more at that moment were my former students who had come to visit. The sudden turn of events had caused a stir. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I didn't mean for this to happen today of all days." "No, please don't worry about us. But really, she's terrible, isn't she?" "Yes, indeed. It's absolutely right that you're getting a divorce." What was supposed to be Linda's birthday party had turned into a celebration of reuniting with my celebrity former students. I took the opportunity to ask them how Linda usually spent her time with these affluent friends. As it turned out, she was indeed an outsider in their circle. Unable to keep up with the celebrities, she nevertheless tried hard to fit in, clinging to anyone she could. Everyone expressed their displeasure at how I, their former teacher, had been mistreated by Linda. They wanted to do more than just let the divorce happen. They wanted to make her panic and regret her actions. "Everyone, I appreciate your feelings, but there's no need for that now. Linda will soon face enough consequences for her actions. She'll understand that before long." I said to everyone and enjoyed the evening chatting with my former students over the meal I had prepared. Just when we were about to call it a day, Linda returned, crying. She must have been shocked after learning the truth. Why did it have to happen like this? "Oh? So you went back to your parents' house, didn't you?" I addressed her, and Linda glared at me sharply. "You brat knew and kept quiet about it, didn't you?" "Hey! What do you mean brat when speaking to her? Because she never tells me anything. She's just a coward," she yelled, then burst into tears. Linda's father had recently declared bankruptcy, struggling to pay his employees and taking on debt. When her parents came to me, they were distressed because they had promised to finance their daughter's marital home but now had to allocate those funds to pay off debts. When I went back home, my parents were preparing to move. They had to sell the house because of the debts. "You knew about this and didn't tell me." Linda sobbed as she said this. I replied in a gentle tone to calm her down. "Your parents didn't want you to worry about them, which is why they asked me to keep quiet. And as for the payments for this house, you ended up covering them, didn't you? So, doesn't that mean I'm the one who should leave?" Realizing she was at a disadvantage, Linda looked down, avoiding my gaze. Anthony placed a hand on Linda's shoulder and said, "Linda, it's time to apologize for everything you've said to her. Even if we can't continue together, we'll make sure you're taken care of after the divorce." Although Anthony spoke these words, Linda sulked and replied, "Why should I be the one to apologize? I've been deceived by her all this time, unaware of my parents' plight, and now I've lost my family home. I'm the one who deserves an apology." The room became noisy at her outburst. I had been treating Linda with kindness out of pity, but my patience had run out. "Don't you understand? Your parents didn't want to burden you, so when they asked me to help with the house payments, they pleaded, Please take care of Linda. Yet, you've been completely unaware of their concerns, only focusing on your own feelings. When I conveyed the feelings of her parents to Linda, she had nothing to retort. Following that, Anthony also spoke. Well, regardless, I've decided to divorce Linda. I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow, so please sign them. For now, pack your belongings tonight and leave by tomorrow. What? You can't just tell me to leave suddenly like that. It's impossible. Linda blurted out as if in a panic. It was because even considering moving in with her parents at their new place, the apartment was only big enough for a couple to live in. Linda, with a troubled look, glanced around. She seemed to be thinking of getting help from her wealthy friends, but not a single one paid her any attention. Sorry, but Linda is no longer one of us. That's right. You're not rich or anything anymore, just another person struggling. As they said this, the celebs took turns berating Linda. They were thinking of me and had just talked about wanting to surprise and fluster her. They wanted to make Linda startle and panic. I guess that's what they're doing. She was biting her lip, her head bowed in silence. It seemed she had come to realize that she had lost not just her family, but also the friends she trusted. Then, the next morning, Anthony went to get the divorce papers and signed them. Linda seemed hesitant, unable to sign for a while. She was probably worried about being kicked out without anywhere to go. Holding the pen, her hand trembling, she finally burst into tears. Sorry, I won't boss Rebecca around anymore. I won't ever call you a housekeeper again. Please forgive me. Looking closely at Linda's crying face, there wasn't a single tear. She must have suddenly become afraid of leaving and started fake crying. Anthony and I, showing an expression that we were not falling for it, blamed her. It's pointless to say such things now. Who would fall for that kind of crying? That's right. Instead of wasting time crying, you should seriously think about what to do next. Perhaps thinking she had no other options, she resignedly signed the divorce papers. And then, carrying her packed belongings, she left the house. Suddenly, I noticed Anthony had tears in his eyes. For him, it had been happiness he had finally found. Yet, he decided to divorce for my sake, which pained my heart. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. Are you sure this was the right thing to do? When I asked, Anthony, who had been drooping his shoulders, turned around and showed a smile. I'm too old to be this pathetic, huh? Fell for a young woman after her money really shows I had no eye for people. His smile seemed so lonely. What should I say to him at a time like this? He had always been a dutiful son. Maybe that's why he made such a sacrifice this time. Anthony, thank you so much. You're not pathetic at all. You're kind and live for others, even at your own expense. Surely, a good person will come along someday. That's right. If you believe, a good connection is bound to come. When I shared my thoughts, Anthony also smiled and said, Yeah, you're right. And Linda, after all, had moved into her parents' cramped apartment. Her parents, despite my being her mother-in-law, had asked me to take care of Linda but lamented that she was driven out due to her selfishness. Linda's parents had truly trusted me. So thinking it wasn't right, they brought her to my place. But without inviting her in, I told them at the entrance. What happens in a marriage is the couple's issue. Anthony is trying his best to move forward positively. So, it's best for the parents not to interfere in their divorce. To my opinion, the parents nodded in agreement, saying, Yes, yes. Linda showed an attitude towards her parents. That's what I said, right? It was pointless to come. That day, having convinced them, I sent them back home at once. However, afterwards, Linda constantly argued with her parents. The parents kept saying it was her fault the marriage failed, even though she had married a good person. But she still insisted that the bad one was me, the lying mother-in-law. Since then, the relationship between Linda and her parents remained tense. Years later, unable to bear it anymore, Linda ran away from home and came to Anthony. She begged for reconciliation, but there was no way Anthony would consider it now. Watching his cold behavior, she lashed out at him. "What about you anyway? I just wanted to be a housewife with a high-earning husband. But Anthony, being just an associate professor with an $80,000 salary, is such a mediocre amount. All my friends' husbands earn over $100,000, so I really felt inferior back then." "What? What are you trying to say? That's why you'll never be able to remarry in your life. Originally not popular with women, and with such an average income, even gold diggers won't come near you." At her words, he burst into laughter. Not just Anthony, but I, listening in the back, and another family member laughed out loud. "Who did you say can't remarry?" Hear that unfamiliar female laughter from the back? "That's my wife." "Huh?" Yes, currently living in this house is Anthony's newly remarried wife. I happened to be visiting, so I listened to the conversation between Anthony and Linda along with them. By the way, Anthony has become a professor at his university in an exceptionally quick rise. Linda showed a surprised look when Anthony told her this. "So that means high income, right? And I thought you would still be single because you don't seem to have any luck with women." "Me? So, you went to several other men? And since no one was interested, you thought I'd still be available?" It seemed Anthony hit the nail on the head. With a look of disappointment, Linda silently left the scene. I'm still in touch with her parents, so I know that Linda has been into singles mixers again since the divorce. However, it seems no man is interested in her, who is not so young anymore. She must have thought Anthony was still single and hoped for a reconciliation. But with her as she is now, I think she'll have to live alone from here on. Even her parents say they've given up on her. Afterwards, according to the parents, Linda moved into the house of an elderly man living alone. Apparently, it was for his money, but soon after moving in, he required care. The elderly man, not wanting to enter a facility, asked her to take care of him. With nowhere else to go, Linda has resigned herself and is now struggling with the unfamiliar task of caregiving. And our house is enjoying happy days since Anthony remarried. Anthony says he learned a lot from his failed marriage. Having broadened his perspective and increased his interactions with people, Anthony became close with a woman of his age who works as a lecturer at the same workplace. She also had a history of divorce, and they hit it off. After a year of dating, he remarried. The new wife, a very nice person, said to me, "Let's live together." However, as much as she offered, I kindly declined. Actually, I received a call from the university I worked at, asking me to come back. Returning to work means living with my son and his wife would be inconvenient in many ways. So, I've decided to continue living freely on my own. At the university, I've interacted with many students. They study various fields and then go out into society. I love being part of such educational environments. Among the affluent students I've met again, some now have children. They've requested this of me. It's great you've returned as a professor. We hope our children can also be under your care, so please stay healthy and continue teaching until then. Waiting until those children turn 18 will take another 14 to 15 years. Yet, I've sworn to fulfill that promise. As long as my body allows, I want to keep watching over as many students as possible. That's my greatest joy as a university professor. Finally, my sister Whitney has given birth. Our family was overjoyed, and even though it wasn't Christmas, relatives gathered together. The stars of the show were, of course, Whitney and her baby. With food and drinks ready, the party began. After we all toasted, my husband Brad approached Whitney and the baby. Whitney handed the baby to Brad, and he held the baby in his arms. Brad looked at the baby with such a loving gaze, as if he were holding his own child. "Hello, baby. Oh, you're so cute." After admiring the baby, he turned to me and said, "If only you could actually have kids." Followed by a sigh. "Still really cute. Wonder who it looks like." He insulted me in front of all the relatives, seemingly unaware of the icy atmosphere that followed. In the frozen silence, the family gathered around Brad and Whitney, enclosing them. Whitney and Brad, engrossed with the baby, hadn't noticed until Whitney's husband Chuck spoke up. "It really doesn't seem to take after me. There are elements of Whitney, though." He confronted Brad calmly. It seemed Whitney and Brad finally noticed the awkward air. Surrounded by relatives, they looked to be huddling together. "Overall, Brad, it seems to take after you, don't you think?" Donald, Brad's dad, added insult to injury. "Really now? Brad, it's the spitting image of you when you were little." His tone was cold, unfitting for the celebration. "Eh?" Seeing Brad taken aback, I couldn't help but let out a smile. Brad had no idea that I had been laying the groundwork with the relatives. I'm Zoe, 42 years old. My life has been nothing extraordinary. Not academically gifted, nor athletically talented. Not the type to stand out, I've probably been forgotten by my classmates, leading a plain life. I have a younger sister, Whitney. Unlike me, Whitney is beautiful and stylish. Though our age difference spared me from blatant comparisons, from what I saw, Whitney was adored by many from a young age. Becoming a show-off in elementary school worked to her advantage, making her a central figure in her class. People gravitated towards her, regardless of gender, and after school, friends were always coming over. As she grew older, perhaps thinking little of my plainness, Whitney would say, "Zoe, you're so plain. Make sure not to show your face when my friends are over." Ignoring me even when her friends weren't around. Confused by Whitney's attitude and feeling uneasy around my own sister, I decided to move out. I had a job lined up and had saved some money from working part-time while attending college. So I moved out without anyone stopping me. It was lonely at times, but being alone was more comfortable than being nagged by Whitney. Occasionally, when I visited home, I heard from Mom that Whitney's behavior seemed to be getting worse year by year. By the time she was in high school, Whitney started going after people's boyfriends. And Mom would come to me for advice. But since I had no experience with love, all I could do was try to console Mom. In the end, Whitney never changed, and Mom's worries never ceased. I became close to a senior coworker while working together on a project. His name was Brad. He was 2 years older than me, someone I had been on the same team with since the last project. I had never been approached by men before, but after the project ended and we all went out for drinks, he asked for my contact information. Even while drinking, I was the sober one, taking care of drunk colleagues and supporting the organizer, which apparently caught his attention. "How about we go out for dinner, just the two of us?" Thinking he had asked for my contact for work-related reasons, I was surprised by his sudden invitation. Finding no reason to decline and thinking this would be a one-time thing, I accepted his invitation. However, when we actually sat down to eat and talk, we got along so well that time flew by. Unable to suppress the feeling that I didn't want it to end with just this once, I found myself saying, "May I have the pleasure of inviting you out next time," in a surprising move. Perhaps it was the alcohol talking. I was flustered after saying those words. Brad looked stunned. Oh no. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I meant for work advice, not that. I didn't have any ulterior motive. I rushed to explain, wanting to run away from the embarrassment. Then, ulterior motive. You're an interesting person, Zoe. Brad burst out laughing. I'd be happier if it was with ulterior motives. Suddenly serious, Brad took my arm. Shall we go to another place? I quietly nodded and followed Brad. I'll never forget that night. Even after we got married, we would laugh about it when recalling that time. My first love at 28 felt embarrassing, but he accepted me and took the lead. With him, my once plain life seemed to blossom into something beautiful. At 28, I finally understood what love was, and I gained confidence. 2 years later, he proposed, and we got married. Me, Zoe, 30 years old. Married at a nice round age. And with a new name, I decided to start a new life. I got along well with Brad's parents, especially Mael, as if we were friends. The common mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict was non-existent for us. Whitney, attending our wedding, seemed enraptured by the atmosphere, barely acknowledging me. After the ceremony, as Brad and I were heading to the next venue, Whitney ran up to us. Zoe! Today's wedding was so beautiful. It makes me want to get married soon too. Any past resentment seemed gone. Whitney smiled at me. It's about time I settled down too. Not just any man will do. I'll find the right one and have a wedding that everyone can celebrate. It seemed our wedding made her crave a normal happiness. Declaring her intention to change, Whitney left. I was stunned by our brief exchange, but wanted to believe in her words of change. If my image had cast a positive light on Whitney, then I was satisfied. Feeling that years of resentment had dissipated made me genuinely happy. I looked forward to having face-to-face conversations in the future. Since my marriage, Mom's worries shifted from Whitney to me. Yes, about children. Getting married at 30, I understood my parents' eagerness to see grandchildren. Of course, I wanted children too. I was working but planned to quit if I had a child. Initially, I hadn't thought deeply about it, but as time went on, I grew tired of Mom's constant nudging. Wanting to respond to my parents' feelings, I began to excessively consult with Brad. Initially, Brad took it lightly, saying, "Don't rush, it'll happen when it's meant to." However, as I repeatedly brought up the same concerns, "Come on, I'm tired today. Let's not talk about this anymore," he started to visibly show his annoyance. 5 years into our marriage, we hadn't had children, and by that time, Brad seemed to have given up. I was 35 before I knew it. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for people older than me to have children. But I knew I was reaching the age where I had to prepare myself. I knew that if we truly wanted children, we would have to undergo the appropriate tests and treatments. And I was aware of how difficult that could be. Brad was saying, even without children, we have the option to enjoy life together. But I couldn't give up. Should we try getting tested, just once? Holding on to a last hope, I asked Brad. Brad was reluctant but agreed to go to the hospital. Perhaps thinking that if a problem was identified with either of us, I would give up. However, Brad's attitude became colder after we went for the tests. When we went back to the hospital to get the results, I understood why Brad was being cold. The issue with not being able to have children was on Brad's side. Unable to accept the test results, perhaps because of his pride, Brad started to take out his frustration on me. Unable to maintain a happy relationship, all I could do was wait for him to calm down. 3 years later, Brad's demeanor had improved compared to back then. But he still came home late or not at all sometimes. By that time, Whitney had finally found someone to marry. It had been 8 years since our wedding, and it seemed she had struggled a lot during that time. Her habit of playing around since her younger days was hard to break. And even when she found someone good, she would quickly lose interest, so relationships didn't last. However, the man Whitney found this time was broad-minded enough to accept all of her past actions. Moreover, we learned at their wedding that Whitney's husband was an elite businessman working for a major trading company. How they met and got to the point of marriage was unclear, but seeing Whitney happy reminded me of my own early marriage days. I hadn't imagined things turning out this way back then. Still, I believed that marrying Brad was my happiness. Even without children, we could still make it as a couple. Watching Whitney in her wedding dress, I reaffirmed my love for Brad in my heart. Realizing that children were not in the cards for Brad and me, Mom shifted her hopes to Whitney. Honestly, I was relieved to no longer be pressured by Mom. Whitney was still in her 20s and likely to meet Mom's expectations. Somewhere inside, I too had hopes for Whitney. 3 years later, the grandchild Mom had been longing for was finally on its way, growing inside Whitney. Mom cried and thanked Whitney when she found out. Hearing this news, I felt like my worries were finally over. It had been such a long journey to this day. My relationship with Brad wasn't great, but I hoped this could be a turning point. We hadn't spoken much lately. Whenever he did open his mouth, it was only to make snide remarks, but Brad's attitudes seemed to change when he learned about Whitney's pregnancy. Perhaps he felt guilty towards my mom for us not being able to have children. As Whitney's belly grew, conversations with Brad increased. Whitney's due date was drawing close. At home, the anticipation for the first grandchild made Dad and Mom restless. And then, Whitney finally gave birth. Our family was overjoyed, and relatives gathered together even though it wasn't Christmas. Attending Whitney's baby shower were Brad and me. Brad's parents, Whitney and my dad and mom, and Whitney's husband Chuck and his parents. It was the first time so many relatives had gathered together. The stars of the show were, of course, Whitney and her baby. I was busy in the kitchen preparing the food and drinks. With everything ready, the party started. After we all toasted, Brad approached Whitney and the baby. Whitney handed the baby to Brad, and he held the baby in his arms. Normally, showing a baby to relatives would be a common sight, but something felt off. Brad looked at the baby with such a loving gaze, as if he were holding his own child. The affection he showed towards his wife's sister's child seemed a bit too intense. Without caring about that, Brad held the baby and murmured, "Hello, baby. Aw, you're so cute." After showering the baby with love, he turned to me and bitterly said, "If only you could actually have kids." Followed by a sigh. "Still really cute. Wonder who it looks like." He insulted me in front of all the relatives, seemingly unaware of the icy atmosphere that followed. In the frozen silence, my dad, Brad's parents, Chuck, and his parents gathered around Brad and Whitney, enclosing them. Whitney and Brad, engrossed with the baby, hadn't noticed until Chuck finally spoke up. "Really, it doesn't seem to take after me. It seems to have few similarities with Whitney too." He calmly confronted Brad. It seemed Whitney and Brad finally noticed the awkward air. Surrounded by relatives, they appeared to be huddling together. "Overall, Brad, it seems to take after you, don't you think?" Brad's dad added to the tension, saying, "Indeed. Brad, it's the spitting image of you when you were little." His voice was cold, inappropriate for the celebration. Seeing Brad taken aback, I couldn't help but smile. Brad was unaware that I had been laying the groundwork with the relatives. Months ago, I happened to see Brad's mobile phone. That day, I had taken the morning off to go to the hospital and found Brad's phone left on the dining table. Thinking to deliver it to him at work later, I was about to put it in my bag when the phone vibrated. Curiosity led me to glance at the screen, displaying a message from Whitney. "Your baby is growing bigger." My blood ran cold. Next, I was seething with anger. Whitney was trying to steal Brad. Given Whitney's past behavior, there was no doubt in my mind. To confirm, I looked at the message exchange between Whitney and Brad. It was an affair. Whitney planned to pass Brad's child as Chuck's. Brad was waiting for the right time to divorce me and remarry Whitney. I took photos of the message exchange as evidence. Since then, I've acted oblivious. Brad's parents believed me immediately due to our close relationship. They also felt sorry for their son's actions. I approached Chuck about it once before Whitney gave birth. He seemed to have had suspicions about Whitney's pregnancy. Showing him the evidence, he agreed to my plan. And so, we've come to this moment. Brad, caught off guard, while Whitney smiled brightly. "Stop it, everyone, that's such a bad joke," she said, feigning innocence. "Would you stop your bad jokes?" The voice trembled with anger. I felt sorry for asking everyone to play along until now. And Whitney seemed to finally sense the deep loathing in his angry voice. Whitney's complexion changed. Noticing this, Brad stepped in to defend her. "Hey, Whitney's just tired from giving birth. No need to speak like that." I confronted Brad, fueled by the future he planned for his mistress. "I see you can be kind for the sake of your future wife." I showed him the screen of his mobile phone. The photo of the message exchange with Whitney. Brad, shocked then glaring, yelled, "What the hell is this?" He stood up, grabbing me by the collar. "When did you start doing such dirty things?" He didn't even try to make excuses. It would have been better if he had tried to explain it was all a misunderstanding. When he raised his fist at me, Chuck intervened. "Stop raising your hand to a woman." The grip Chuck had on Brad's arm was forceful. Brad shook off his hand and retorted in frustration. "Saying that. Aren't you two the ones in a shady relationship?" Retreating while rubbing his grabbed arm. Whitney, seizing the moment, jumped into the fray. "Yeah. Instead of doubting Brad and me, you should be looking into these too." However, it seemed like no one was listening to her. The silence was broken by me and Whitney's dad. "Enough, Whitney." Dad had always been a man of few words. He was gentle and, according to Mom, sometimes too soft, never getting angry at Whitney's misbehavior. But this time, he couldn't stay silent. "It's your bad habit, isn't it? I thought you had changed after getting married, but stealing your sister's husband." Dad spoke quietly but with a voice as cold as ice to Whitney. "I should have scolded you more. I didn't want you to see me like this." After giving me a sorrowful look, Dad slapped Whitney's cheek hard. "Ouch!" Looking down at Whitney holding her cheek, he sighed and then turned to Brad. "No, Donald. It's not like that. This is all a misunderstanding." Brad finally tried to defend himself just as Dad's fist hit him. Brad crumpled to the ground. Then, Dad loudly said to them, "The pain you're feeling is nothing compared to what Zoe and Chuck went through. Do you understand?" Whitney's sobbing could be heard, though it was doubtful if her tears were from remorse. Dad turned to Chuck and his parents to apologize deeply. "I'm truly sorry for the unforgivable act my daughter has committed." Mom also apologized next to Dad. Then to Brad's parents, "I'm sorry for raising my hand to Brad in front of you," apologizing deeply once again. Brad's parents also apologized to us. "What is this? I did nothing wrong." Brad began to shout, breaking the silence.
It's all because Zoe is infertile.
What a pitiful sight.
So, it's not my fault.
Whitney also started to struggle.
It's Zoe's fault. Having such a wonderful husband but not being able to bear children. So I decided to have his child instead.
Whitney seemed to realize midway. No one was on their side. Cold stares were fixed on them. I decided to make it clear. Listen, Whitney. I struggled to keep my anger from seeping into my gentle tone. The cause of infertility wasn't me.
Wah!
Whitney was stunned. We had fertility tests done. Everyone listened silently to my voice. The results showed that Brad was the cause. The room went quiet.
Wah! No, that.
Whitney's eyes began to dart around. A habit when she's hiding something.
Brad? That's a lie, right?
Whitney confronted Brad, but he was deflated.
I don't accept those test results.
Brad couldn't accept that he was the one unable to have children, but I showed the hospital's test result papers. Dad and Mom looked at the evidence, and from Whitney's reaction, it seemed they realized something.
Whitney, whose child is that baby really?
Delivering the final blow.
It's Chuck's child, obviously.
She seemed unaware that her story was changing by the moment.
Then, to put Chuck's mind at ease, why not do a DNA test?
Whitney's eyes darted around nervously.
There's no need for that. It's Chuck's child.
Mom approached Whitney, speaking to her with the gentleness one uses with a small child. Whitney, let's get tested, shall we? I want to believe you, Whitney. Let me believe you this time. Her voice trembled towards the end. Mom was sobbing, huddled over.
You're old enough, Whitney. It's time to take responsibility.
Dad told Whitney, then apologized again to everyone gathered. He promised to report the results later, and Whitney's baby celebration party came to an end. Whitney stubbornly refused the DNA test, but her attitude only spurred our parents more. Dad tried to persuade Whitney himself, but she wasn't willing to listen. Eventually, without Whitney's consent, the test was forcibly conducted. Meanwhile, I had moved out of the house I shared with Brad. Brad, still not accepting his infertility, joked, "So, Whitney will move in after you leave." But I was already starting the divorce proceedings, undistracted. Months after the family gathering, Mom contacted me about Whitney's DNA test results. We were to return to our parents' house to hear the outcome. Brad, Chuck, and I listened intently to the results, which were unexpected by all. A heavy sigh escaped everyone's lips. The father of Whitney's child was neither Chuck nor Brad.
What on earth does this mean?
Dad couldn't contain his anger. Even more furious than when he had slapped Whitney.
What does this mean, you say?
Whitney asked rhetorically, but no one supported her.
Whitney, explain yourself.
Chuck admonished her in a low voice. Resigned, perhaps realizing she couldn't escape the truth any longer, Whitney explained in a small voice.
I don't know who the father is. Chuck was so busy with work right after we got married, and I felt so lonely.
Her voice gradually turned whiny.
It's not my fault Chuck made me feel lonely, right? The child is innocent. Let's pretend that night never happened. Please.
Whitney moved closer to Chuck, not Brad.
So, what about you and Brad?
Chuck asked gently.
Right. Brad was just for fun. I was entertaining him because things weren't going well with Zoe.
Whitney glanced at Brad and laughed. Besides, Brad may come from a wealthy family, but he's so stingy. He never spoiled me. Chuck, you're the only one for me. Whitney clung to Chuck's arm. Brad, faced with the realization of his infertility and Whitney's abandonment, was just staring blankly. "So it is," Chuck muttered softly, then forcefully shook off Whitney's clinging arm. Whitney fell off the couch, but Chuck stood up, towering over her. "I've had enough. Talking to you any further is a waste of time." His eyes filled with hatred and sorrow. "Dad and Mom said, we'll send the divorce papers later. Thank you for everything up to now." Without giving Whitney another look, Chuck left the house. "It's the expected outcome," Mom said, placing a hand on Whitney's shoulder. "From now on, you're nothing to me. Leave this house immediately." Mom had always ultimately accepted Whitney despite her behavior. But this time it seemed she had reached her limit. "I've been too lenient. But don't worry, I won't bother with you anymore. Live strong on your own." We had never seen Mom react so coldly before. But her resolve seemed firm, as if she had come to a clear decision. Dad agreed with her decision, and it was decided that Whitney would be kicked out of the house. "So, how long do you plan to stay here?" I asked Brad, who was left behind. Brad slowly looked up at me. Then, as if realizing something too late, he asked, "Zoe, that kid wasn't mine, right?" "If so, I'm innocent. Whitney was just playing around, as she said. So, why don't we call off the divorce and start over?" I was speechless. After all the mocking, he had the nerve to say that. "I have no intention of starting over with you. I wish I never have to see you again. So please, leave this house right now." I grabbed a mop nearby and hit Brad with it. "Get out now!" I shouted as I chased him out. Later, I finalized the divorce with Brad. I had gotten along well with Mil and wanted to keep in touch, but it wasn't to be. Mil and I had a farewell meal together, mourning our separation. Upon learning of my divorce with Brad, Whitney, who had been hesitant, agreed to divorce Chuck and finally left the family home. She seemed to intend to move in with Brad, but he refused her. Brad, too, was no longer in a position to support Whitney financially. After our divorce, Brad left his job due to discomfort at our shared workplace. He tried to help with the family business, but became estranged from his family and is now looking for new employment while surviving on part-time work. Of course, with alimony payments to me, his life is far from easy. Whitney moving in would be nothing but a nuisance, especially considering she played with his feelings. Shunned by her family, abandoned by Brad, and pursued by Chuck for alimony. Whitney began to drift through the night streets, escaping from everything. But she wasn't the type to attract ordinary men anymore. Once relying on her beauty, post-pregnancy Whitney did nothing to restore her figure. Losing all remnants of her past glory. Unable to escape the glory of being adored in her youth, she became obsessed with a man she met in a nightclub. Drowning in debt and resorting to selling herself, she has fallen to a point of no return. Dad and Mom hired a detective agency to track Whitney's whereabouts, determined never to let her return home. They sold the family home and moved to a condominium in the next town. Mom, sharing this with me, looked sad but resolved not to extend a helping hand to Whitney. If her life were in danger, that'd be different. But that's it. We've decided not to do anything more. Mom's too gentle to bear Whitney's current state. But knows extending help again wouldn't lead to her reform. This is what being a mom is about. Though I never had children of my own, witnessing Mom's compassion and strength fills me with respect. Dad and Mom have taken in Whitney's child, who is nearly 2 years old. His rapid growth is astonishing, and I've been experiencing childcare during visits to my parents' house. I wonder what kind of adult this child without Dad or Mom will become. Yet, I'm determined to shower him with enough love to never feel lesser for it. Today, once again, I received an email from Mom about Whitney's child. We are planning to go on a trip together on the next day off. On my way home from work, I looked up at the night sky and wished for the child's growth. May he grow up to be honest, bright, and earnest. And then, I returned to my solitary apartment, where no one waits. With this, I'll finally get the inheritance. Right before losing consciousness, I heard my husband's voice. I had just finished a hospital visit and was about to head home when suddenly a car sped towards me. I realized it too late to escape and was hit. Amidst the intense pain and fading consciousness, I heard what my husband had said. What did he mean by inheritance? Why was he even here? As I tried to make sense of it, I lost consciousness without seeing him. 3 days later, I woke up and saw on the TV that my husband was acting the part of a grieving, loving husband. I was furious. He was garnering sympathy while pretending to be a good person, even though he had schemed everything. I couldn't let him have his way anymore and decided to seek revenge. I am Jennifer Brown, 29 years old. A music teacher. I've always loved the piano and dreamed of becoming a pianist since childhood. After practicing desperately every day, I managed to get into a music college, but I was overwhelmed by the high level of competition and eventually gave up. I obtained a teaching license and became a music teacher. Currently, I work at a local public middle school, where I'm not just a teacher but also the advisor of the choir club, leading a busy life. Being a teacher is tough, but the kids admire me calling teacher, so I was enjoying fulfilling days. Last year, I married Robert, whom I had dated since college. We were at the peak of happiness in both our personal and professional lives, but it didn't last. My husband Robert was just a mess. He worked at a bar, and because of the nature of his job, he had late shift. Our daily rhythms were completely different, and we began to drift apart. He often drinks after work, so I find him sleeping at the entrance returning home drunk in the morning. Initially, I thought it was just part of his job. But when I came home tired from work, I found clothes thrown about, and the table littered with empty instant noodle cups and finished drink bottles. Seeing this mess every day, my anger just kept building up.
Robert, put your clothes in the laundry. And can you clean up your mess?
What? Stop nagging. I'll do it later.
Later? You always say that and never do it. Do it now.
Frowning, Robert clicked his tongue in annoyance.
If it bothers you so much, do it yourself. You're such a nagging woman. What? I'm tired from work every day. Why do I have to take care of you? Can't you at least take care of your own things?
I'm tired too, you know. Do you think you're the only one? Or do you think you're superior to me because you earn more? I denied that, and Robert sighed.
Then you should do it.
Don't order me around like that. Saying this, Robert lazily lay down on the sofa and started fiddling with his mobile phone. Despite shorter working hours than me, he never helped with housework and just drank around and slept at home. I ended up doing all the cleaning and laundry. Recently, our dates had stopped and we just argued more. Robert was very handsome. He was popular in college that he even had fans from neighboring universities. I felt superior just being able to marry him. I was smitten with the gentlemanly Robert during our courtship, but now I wondered why I married him. However, everyone has their good and bad sides. I thought maybe it was okay for someone handsome to have a flawed personality, so I decided to bear with it. Half a year after getting married, Robert, who usually went out even on his days off, seemed restless one morning. When I finished cleaning up after breakfast, he called me. Actually, the bar's been doing poorly lately. I'm short on cash. Can you lend me some? What? Are you that short on money? What did you spend it on? He had been saying for months that his salary had decreased and he couldn't pay living expenses. But his salary was supposed to be entirely disposable, yet he claimed to be short on money. You know, sometimes I go out for drinks with friends. Alcohol costs a lot.
If it's really for the shop, you should get reimbursed for expenses. It's ridiculous to pay out of your own pocket.
No, it's not that. I mean, I need it for studying. I have to know other bars' menus and stuff for research.
Robert's stammering explanation seemed suspicious.
How much do you need?
You'll give it to me? $200. Just $200 is fine.
I sighed, and Robert happily hugged me. I was exasperated by his opportunistic behavior, but it was exactly this kind of charm that always ensnared me. I took out $200 from my wallet and handed it to him. He hugged me again. I really made the right choice marrying Jennifer. Thank you so much. Because of our constant fighting these days, I felt over the moon when he hugged me while I was exasperated with him. I felt like I had to support him, who had a tough job. But then, he started asking for money almost every month. The amount he wanted kept increasing, and before I knew it, I was giving him as much as $1,000 monthly. For me, just a teacher, it was quite tough to pay $1,000 in addition to regular living expenses. Despite my efforts to save, my savings were rapidly depleting.
Robert, can you pay back even a little of the money I gave you?
What?
Why all of a sudden? You gave me that money, why should I give it back?
It's getting hard to make ends meet. If I keep giving you money, I won't be able to pay for gas or water.
When I spoke to Robert before he went to work, he made a face as if it was a hassle. I can't help it, my salary is too low.
You could if you tried to save a bit, like cutting down on eating out.
I'm doing that for the bar. Are you trying to interfere with my work? Then sell your piano. That'll bring in good money. Saying that, he left the house. My piano is as precious to me as life itself. It was a gift from my father when I was 2 years old. I need it for practice as a music teacher, there's no way I can part with it. Yet, Robert, who casually drinks around, coldly suggested selling it, which infuriated me. After that, Robert and I stopped speaking. He didn't try to talk to me either, and our marital relationship was practically in ruins. I was contemplating divorce when an incident occurred. While playing the piano, a pain shot through my wrist. The pain, like an electric shock from the wrist to the fingertips, became unbearable. When I visited the hospital, I was diagnosed with tendinitis.
If it gets worse, you might need surgery, so you should get a thorough examination at a bigger hospital.
Told this at a nearby clinic, I was given a referral letter. Then, I headed to the general hospital in the next town. If my wrist pain worsens, I might not be able to play the piano anymore. And if I can't play, I might lose my job. If that happens, I don't know what to do to make a living. Having focused solely on playing the piano and not having done any other job, I thought changing careers would be difficult. Before the consultation, I felt anxious and heavy-footed. However, the doctor, after seeing the X-rays, smiled and said it was okay.
Let's observe for now. If possible, please rest your hand. Don't play the piano for about a week, and if the pain worsens, come back for another visit.
I was relieved to hear that it wasn't serious enough for surgery. It happened when I stepped out the parking, just as I was about to leave the hospital triumphantly.
Watch out!
I heard a woman scream and turned around in shock to see a car speeding towards me. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move properly. Then, an immense impact hit my body.
It's an accident! Call an ambulance! Get a doctor!
I heard various voices. Amidst fading consciousness, a familiar voice reached my ears.
With this, the inheritance plan will work out.
I heard a distinctly familiar voice amidst the others. But I lost consciousness before I could identify the speaker. 3 days later, I woke up to the ceiling of a hospital room. When I tried to sit up, intense pain shot through my body. Ow, it hurts.
Ms. Brown!
Can you hear me? I'll go get the doctor, just wait here. I couldn't respond to the nurse's voice. She hurried out, and then the doctor came running.
Ms. Brown, do you know where you are?
The hospital? Correct. You were hit by a car after your last visit and have been hospitalized. You haven't woken up for 3 days, so we were worried.
I was shocked to hear it had been 3 days, but I couldn't voice it. The nurse and doctor then explained my current situation. I had been hit by a car and suffered multiple complex fractures throughout my body. I was still in a period of absolute rest, not even allowed to sit up.
It must be boring just lying there. Do you want to watch TV? You can watch it while lying down.
The nurse turned on the TV for me, ensuring my comfort. Coincidentally, the TV was covering my accident.
Oh, you probably don't want to see this, do you? Should I change the channel?
No, please leave it. I want to watch. I couldn't take my eyes off the news. It reported that a woman named Amelia, who hit me with her car, was arrested for dangerous driving causing injury. Seeing the perpetrator's photo, everything made sense to me. Then I realized that the voice talking about receiving an inheritance when I was hit was Robert's. He had intentionally run me over with a car for money. However, the news only reported that he was in Amelia's car as a friend, nothing more. The screen switched to Robert.
I never imagined that the car I was in would cause an accident and hit my wife. I keep seeing that scene in my dreams. I can't sleep at night.
I exploded with anger at his tearful interview. This accident was undoubtedly schemed by Robert. I couldn't stand him causing me this accident for inheritance and then continuing to act like a good husband. Determined not to let Robert have his way anymore, I vowed revenge. 4 hours after waking up, Robert burst into the room, panting.
Jennifer! Thank goodness you're awake!
I shook off Robert's hand as he tried to grasp mine uninvited. What's wrong? Are you still in pain?
Yes, I am.
My whole body is in excruciating pain, all because of you. What are you talking about? The atmosphere grew tense, making even the nearby nurse's expressions stiffen. Trying to lighten the mood, Robert forced a smile. Are you still confused? Is there anything you want to eat? I'll go buy it. I don't want anything. Can you please leave my room right now? Why are you saying that? Jennifer, you're acting strange.
It's not strange at all. The accident was schemed by you for the inheritance, wasn't it?
Robert looked surprised at my words. What are you talking about? Why would I do something like that?
Really? Then why did you take out a high-value life insurance policy a month before the accident?
You said you couldn't even afford to pay the living expenses because your salary was low. That. I was told it's good to have insurance in case something happens. Amelia, the girl who hit Jennifer with her car, she works in insurance sales. She used to work part-time at my bar. Robert had given the same explanation when he took out the insurance. They had been close since her part-time days, and after she got a job at an insurance company, they kept in touch. He said he felt sorry for her as she was struggling to sell policies. As he worried about getting scolded by her boss and having low pay, he decided to take out a policy to help her out. The insurance was taken out because you, Jennifer, earn more than me, right? If something happened and you couldn't work, it would be a problem, so I contracted the insurance for you. Isn't that reasonable? Hearing that, it seemed like his explanation might not be wrong.
You're in a situation where you have to borrow money from me and can't pay the living expenses, yet you can afford insurance premiums? If you can pay that much, why not repay me?
Don't say that. I got the insurance for your sake. Robert said this while holding my hand. His expression looked genuinely concerned, but I couldn't bring myself to trust him.
If that's the case, you won't mind if the insurance money doesn't come in, right? I need quite a lot of money for surgery and hospitalization. I'll use the insurance money we received, so please transfer the entire amount to my account.
What? All of it? Is that much really necessary?
It might be. If it's not enough, will you pay the rest, Robert?
What? Not enough. That can't be true. Robert's face stiffened as he muttered to himself. Seeing him like this, the nurses also cast suspicious glances. I beckoned Robert to come closer and whispered so only he could hear.
It's useless to lie anymore. There isn't much insurance money because I'm alive, and there's zero inheritance. You must be disappointed.
Robert frowned upon hearing this.
Zero inheritance? What do you mean?
It means there's almost no savings. Did you think you would get all my money if I was gone?
Why is there none? You're a public servant, you earn well, right?
Robert's voice grew louder, and a nurse frowned upon overhearing him.
I was lending money to you, Robert. How much do you think a teacher's salary is? I'm still in my 20s, I don't earn that much. Plus, there are living expenses to pay. I never had any financial leeway.
You've got to be kidding. What was all this for, then?
Robert hung his head, clutching at his forehead. My anger surged at his true nature showing.
You won't get away with this easily. You'll be arrested too if they find out you were an accomplice.
No one will believe that. Did you see the news? I'm the devoted husband worried about his wife. No one will believe anything you say. They'll just think you've gone mad from hitting your head.
While saying this, Robert laughed.
You can say that now, but not for long.
I replied calmly to Robert's provocation. Then, he looked at me with a cold gaze.
Don't get cocky. You should have just gone to the other world.
I despised him for saying such things so casually. I sighed, waiting for the moment of revenge. Just as I sighed, the door of the hospital room opened abruptly, and men in a suit entered.
Who the hell are you?
We're the police. Is what you just said true?
What? What are you talking about? I'm just worried about my wife.
Ignoring Robert, who was sweating and panicking, the police reached for my bedside and took out a mobile phone. The phone was in the middle of a call.
We've heard everything. Even the part about she should have gone to the other world.
What? Why are the police?
He turned pale and started to tremble.
I called them. I wanted their help to uncover the truth about the accident. Thanks to you, I could fully expose your true nature.
What, you? Officer, this is a misunderstanding. I just have a quick temper, and I thought Jennifer was picking a fight, so I snapped. It's not really about the money.
No one will believe those words now.
Then show me evidence that I'm the perpetrator of the accident.
Robert kicked the bed in frustration. I glared at him and turned to the police.
The woman currently arrested, Amelia, is his mistress. They've been close for quite a while.
What? Don't say such nonsense without evidence.
There is evidence. I had hired a private detective agency to investigate you. We have photos of you with Amelia and records of your activities over the past few months. Lying won't help you now.
Ever since Robert frequently started asking me for money, I suspected he was in debt and hired a private detective agency investigate. The investigation revealed that he was having an affair, spending money on drinks and hotels daily. Knowing his mistress's face, I was certain he was involved in the accident when I saw her on the news. The police were making a phone call to search my house while listening to the conversation. Meanwhile, Robert was sweating and visibly shaken.
So you ran out of money I gave you, and planned this accident to get the inheritance and insurance money, planning to live with her, isn't that right?
That's just your wild imagination.
Then I'll take the insurance money. Withdraw it now and bring it to me.
Robert fell silent. It seems like he doesn't want to give up the money at all. Even though Robert refuses to hand over the insurance money despite the situation, the surrounding skepticism grows.
I've heard from the police. They're concerned about how much you've been worrying about that woman.
Well, she's my friend, it's natural to be concerned.
The police told me they're concerned about how much you worry about the other woman. You're not even mad at Amelia for what happened to me. And why were you at the hospital that day, at that time?
It was a weekday morning when I went to the hospital. Robert should have been getting ready for work around noon, and it was the time when I finished my appointment. Yet, he was inexplicably near a hospital in a neighboring city.
I just happened to have a day off.
On your day off, you were at the hospital? There are no places around there that you would visit. You weren't being treated there, so there must have been some reason you were there.
Robert was speechless, sweating profusely. The police then restrained him.
We'll ask for the details at the station. Please come with us.
Wait. I'm not guilty. It's all a misunderstanding by Jennifer.
His desperate excuses were ignored by the police, who remained unfazed with a stern expression.
Officer, if he had planned the accident, what kind of punishment could he face? Well, if it's premeditated, it could be attempted murder. We need to hear the full story first, though.
Attempted murder? Help me! Jennifer, I'm not guilty! Forgive me!
Robert, pale as a ghost, shook off the police's grip and clung to my bed.
I admit I was wrong for cheating and borrowing money. I'm sorry. But this time, I was just in the car. I'm not guilty.
Before I lost consciousness, I heard your voice, Robert, saying now we'll get the inheritance as planned. How can I forgive someone who did this for money?
When I spoke up, he started making unbelievable statements.
What? Are you sure about that? If I get arrested, it will reflect badly on you too. You'll have trouble at work. It's in your best interest to be careful.
Why should I forgive you? Do you even realize what you've done? I plan to divorce you, and whether you get arrested or not is none of my concern.
I sighed in exasperation at his shocked expression.
Wait. Talking about divorce at a time like this? What do you mean? How can I live without Jennifer?
I made a further attack on Robert, who held his head in despair.
That's not my problem. Just so you know, I was planning to divorce even without this incident. I have proof of your infidelity, and I'll get a hefty compensation in the divorce trial.
Compensation in a divorce trial? How can I possibly pay that? If I get arrested, I'll lose my job too.
That's your own fault for committing a crime. You should have thought twice before doing such things.
Robert then knelt down, defeated.
I was tricked. Amelia said to me, if you wanted money, you should have just taken out insurance and staged an accident. Initially, I was supposed to drive, but since my license was suspended, she decided to drive. It's all her fault.
Robert shouted. Hearing Robert try to lighten his sentence even in this situation, I couldn't contain my fury.
Tricked or not, I don't care. I'll never forget you saying I should have gone to the other world. That was your true feeling.
That's a lie. I didn't mean it.
I can't believe such words. I never want to have anything to do with you again, Robert. I'll consult a lawyer about the divorce, so never contact me again.
No, that's a lie. Stop it. I'm not bad. Let go.
He started to thrash around, but he was warned that further resistance could lead to obstruction of justice charges, and he quietly left the hospital room with the police. The next day, I learned from the news that Robert had been arrested. The once kind and grieving husband was now vilified as a criminal who plotted murder for insurance money. Over a decade later, I heard that he was released from prison. He had been fired from his job and struggled to find new employment due to his criminal record. Apparently, he was now working at a grocery store. I saw on social media that he is often reprimanded at work for having a lot to learn. As his case was reported in national news, he's well known to many. Apparently, people recognize him and take his photos without permission, making him uncomfortable. The photos show him looking significantly aged and unkempt, likely due to financial struggles. It's sad to see such a drastic change in someone who was once celebrated for his looks during his college days. Despite feeling this way, I cannot forgive him. I hope he spends his life reflecting on his actions. After everything that happened, I resigned from the school where I was working and moved out of state. There, I found a job as a piano teacher. Miraculously, my hands were not permanently damaged from the accident, and I was able to play the piano again. Now, I am remarried to a different man, and we are blessed with 2 daughters, living happily as a family of 4. When I married Robert, I chose him based on his looks. However, this experience taught me a painful lesson about not judging people by their appearance. My current husband may not be conventionally handsome, but he's kind, honest, and a wonderful person. I've made a vow to myself to never be swayed by appearances and to discern people's true nature. I was standing there, unable to move or understand what was happening to me, when my husband Harrison, who was next to me, asked, "Are you okay?" It was then that I realized I had been doused with water. In front of me was Maëlle Jeanette, holding a cup and smirking nastily.
"This is not your place. You're shamelessly overstepping. How many times do I have to tell you you're not welcome here?"
Jeanette's angry shout filled the room at Frank's funeral. My name is Mila, a 35-year-old self-employed business owner. I met Harrison through a mutual acquaintance 6 years ago, and we married after I got pregnant. We've had our ups and downs, but now we live happily with our 1-year-old daughter. Harrison's family owns a retail shop selling miscellaneous goods and vintage clothing. Harrison, their only son, went to college in Boston, intending to take over the family business. However, after landing a job at a major corporation post-graduation, his parents easily conceded. "There's no need for you to take over our debt-ridden business. We're proud you can work at a prestigious company. Don't worry about us, build your own family in Boston." Encouraged by his father Frank, Harrison worked diligently in Boston and achieved a promotion to a managerial position at a young age. We met, quickly started dating, and before we knew it, I was pregnant. Since our relationship had been headed towards marriage, the sequence of events have changed, leading to us announcing both our marriage and pregnancy to our parents at the same time. My parents, who live in another state, were delighted with my marriage and pregnancy, except for Jeanette. "What? Pregnant? With him?" I still vividly remember Jeanette's words to me during my first visit to Harrison's family home. Frank scolded Jeanette, but he only made excuses for her in a low voice to me, especially regarding Harrison, saying, "She doesn't mean it." And Jeanette, having her son's girlfriend over for the first time, offered nothing at all. It wasn't naivety or an oversight, but a deliberate display of not offering anything. "Pregnant? Are you going to have the baby? Then you must continue the environment I provided for my son and raise your child the same way. I'll teach you how." "Wait a minute. I'm planning to take maternity leave and then return to work, so I appreciate your concern, but we will decide and manage our child's upbringing." Though I was reluctant to argue with my Maëlle on our first meeting, I felt that it would be important for her to understand our stance. Jeanette, clearly not expecting me to talk back, glared at me, her face filled with surprise and anger. Then she pressed on, "What kind of job forces you to work instead of raising your child?" Jeanette seemed to be implying dissatisfaction with her son's salary at a major corporation, aggressively questioning me. When I mentioned that I was the secretary to the president of a publicly traded company, Jeanette looked at me scornfully and said, "That's distasteful." Jeanette appeared to have a stereotype of secretaries as glamorous women serving powerful men or attractive but incompetent at their jobs. "Is Harrison being deceived? Are you really marrying him?" she asked repeatedly. Harrison, with a strained laugh, simply said, "Yes." He didn't support me but instead laughed it off, eager to leave the situation, which left me feeling disappointed and unsure about our marriage. However, Frank, having listened to the whole conversation, was different. "It's tough to be a secretary. Before I was married, I worked at a company where the bosses had secretaries. It's a really difficult job. This idea of secretaries being distasteful is so outdated," he said, criticizing Jeanette. Jeanette, not expecting to be reprimanded, turned red and hastily said, "I need to step out for a bit," and left the house. Frank later reassured me, "If you have any troubles, you can always come to us for advice." Hearing that, I felt for the first time that I was accepted as a member of the family. After that, since our marriage was sudden due to the pregnancy, we didn't have a wedding ceremony and just completed the paperwork. After the birth, we had talked about having a small ceremony with just close family once things settled down, but those plans fell through dramatically.
"What? Dad has cancer?
Harrison was shaken by the sudden news, and since I was worried about him going alone, I went with him to the hospital where Frank was admitted. As soon as we arrived at the hospital, we were called by a doctor and, without any mental preparation, were informed about Frank's limited time left. Entering his room, we saw Frank with numerous tubes attached to his arm. It was painfully hard to look at. Noticing us, Frank gave a sorry smile and said, "My apologies." I wondered why Frank, who had done nothing wrong, was apologizing, but soon understood. Frank had been hospitalized for several days, and Jeanette hadn't visited him at all. According to Frank, since he was given a terminal diagnosis, Jeanette thought he wouldn't know what was happening and took the opportunity to go on trips and shopping sprees. Frank didn't know for sure since he was in the hospital, but he heard it from neighbors who visited him, so it was likely true. Frank, unable to prepare his own change of pajamas and underwear during his hospital stay, said to us apologetically, "I'm sorry to ask this so soon after your wedding, but I need your help." Since my pregnancy was stable, I had no problem going to the hospital in the morning, so I gladly took on the role of caring for Frank. I was originally planning to take maternity leave at 9 months pregnant, but with Frank's care needed, I applied for caregiving leave at my company, planning to transition it into maternity leave. But even this didn't go as planned. With Frank's hospitalization, Jeanette began neglecting housework entirely to indulge in her leisure activities every day. Consequently, the house became cluttered with garbage, and Jeanette, who was somewhat osteoporotic, slipped, fell, and fractured her bones. Now, not only Frank's, but also Jeanette's care fell onto us. "Please, just until Mom can walk again, can we live together?" Frank's cancer treatment was stabilizing, and he was close to being discharged when Jeanette fractured her bone. My husband asked me, and I reluctantly agreed to live together for a limited time, but this decision would later become a source of great regret.
"You slowpoke! Hurry up and prepare the meal!"
Jeanette, now having difficulty walking and using crutches, started hurling verbal abuse at me due to her frustration of being immobile. I had to clean the room Jeanette dirtied for Frank's return, but with my growing belly, it was hard labor, and I struggled to move as I wanted. Jeanette mercilessly berated me and would hit me with her crutches when nearby. I protected my belly as best I could, but my arms became covered in bruises. Such a big target, easy to hit. I was terrified, thinking this was the same woman who had once given birth. I reported Jeanette's harassment to Harrison, but he would just say, "It's only for now. She's just stressed because of her injury." He showed no signs of helping me, and I felt increasingly cornered. And then, Jeanette, with her mobility impaired, brazenly started inviting men to the house during weekdays when Harrison was at work. "Jeanette, does Frank know about this?" "It doesn't matter. He won't be returning to this house anyway. His time is almost up. This house and all the property will be mine." Jeanette said this and laughed loudly with the man who seemed to be her affair partner. She even threatened me, saying if I spoke to anyone about this, she would make me suffer. The repeated scenes of Jeanette's verbal and physical abuse haunted me every night, leading to severe headaches and palpitations that kept me awake. Eventually, I miscarried the baby. "I can't even see my grandchild's face because of you. You useless thing!" Jeanette cruelly berated me as I returned home after the medical procedure.
"You're banned from this house. Get out now!"
Forced out of the house, I went straight to my company and submitted my resignation. My boss noticed something was off and repeatedly asked me not to do anything foolish. When I mentioned, "My baby is gone," he said to contact him anytime if I needed anything, regardless of our professional relationship. He accepted my resignation without further questions. Afterwards, on my way to the courthouse to collect divorce papers, I decided to visit Frank for the final goodbye. It had been a few days since I last visited Frank's hospital room, and he was visibly surprised and concerned to see me, which brought me to tears. I had always kept silent about the treatment I received from Jeanette, not wanting to worry Frank, who was battling his illness. But Frank, who had noticed bruises on my arms before, asked me to tell him everything.
Crying, I poured out everything that had happened. Frank kept apologizing, and his face was contorted with anger.
This is definitely a case for divorce. But I can't just let them get away with this. I want to fight back. I hate to ask this, but can you help me with one last request?
After listening to my story, Frank proposed a plan for revenge against his wife and son. Feeling empowered by Frank's support, I felt ready to confront the situation, no longer wanting to be a victim.
I don't want to just cry myself to sleep anymore.
Whispering these words, Frank weakly grasped my hand and said, "Let's do this together." Subsequently, I stayed in the hospital room as Frank's attendant until his discharge. As soon as Frank and I arrived home, Jeanette snapped.
"What? You brought that useless woman too? You didn't clean the house, it's still dirty. Clean it up now." Furthermore, she accused, "Where have you been these past few days? You must have been with some man, right?"
When Frank told her I had been caring for him in the hospital, she was left speechless and silently left the house. Soon after, as planned with Frank, I installed indoor cameras and wireless listening devices in various places. This was to gather evidence of infidelity. As expected, when I accompanied Frank to the hospital for outpatient treatment, Jeanette confidently invited men into our home. "We have the evidence," Frank said. Frank contacted a lawyer friend and began the process to disinherit Jeanette. Next, while Jeanette was away on a trip, Frank arranged for a negotiator to come to our home and create an official will. This was to prevent Jeanette from forging a will in Frank's name. Later, I started the process of taking over Frank's retail business, consulting a lawyer again. Despite the taxes and other financial issues that came with inheriting the business, I had a plan to recover the costs, so I decided to take it over.
Honestly, I've been running the business just doing what I like, not really thinking about profit. But I want you to take this as compensation for the harm my family caused you, Mila."
I was hesitant to accept the company and its real estate, but considering it as Frank's final gesture of goodwill, I gladly agreed. "Frank, I'll protect this company, so don't worry." As I assured him, Frank smiled at me. After several hospital visits for chemotherapy and outliving the initial prognosis, Frank peacefully passed away at home, just as I was getting used to managing the business.
Finally. Doctors' life expectancy predictions are so unreliable. Let's quickly finish the funeral and turn this house and land into cash.
Despite Frank having just passed away, I was unable to contain my anger at Jeanette's harsh words.
"You're no longer needed. I don't need your care anymore, so leave this house right now." Treating me as if shooing away an animal, I responded to Jeanette, "I understand. I don't want to stay here for another minute."
Saying that, I grabbed my pre-packed suitcase and prepared to leave. Harrison, who had always been like heir to me, didn't try to stop me as he wanted to stay with his beloved mother.
"Let's meet for the last time at the funeral," I said, and left for the weekly rental apartment I had arranged.
After dropping off my luggage, I changed into morning clothes and headed to Frank's funeral for the final act of my revenge. Frank, beloved by the local residents, had attracted many people to his funeral. Getting out of the taxi, I was heading to the family's waiting room when Jeanette suddenly splashed water on me.
"This is not your place. You're shamelessly overstepping. How many times do I have to tell you you're not welcome here?"
After glaring at Harrison, who was feigning concern, I confronted Jeanette. "It seems you don't understand anything, Jeanette. Are you all right in the head? You'll be the one in trouble when I leave." As I spoke, Jeanette retorted,
"Shut up! How dare you, just a son's wife!"
and once again threw liquid at me. Even I had to exclaim,
"What? If you're going to act like this, I'm leaving, and I won't forgive you no matter how much you cry or yell."
With that, I walked away from Jeanette. I intended to take a taxi home immediately, but since the liquid Jeanette had thrown on me turned out to be alcohol, not water, I headed to the restroom to wash it off. It probably wouldn't stain, but I needed to clean the alcohol from my funeral attire and hair. After touching up my makeup, I exited the restroom to find an agitated Jeanette rushing towards me.
What is this? Explain yourself.
Not understanding what she meant, I listened silently as Jeanette ranted about the existence of another will separate from the one she was holding. Soon, relatives drawn by the commotion began to gather. Jeanette, forging a will is a serious crime, I said. When she acted ignorant, I explained in front of the relatives. Frank had already made a will and stored it with the courts. So the one Jeanette has is a fake. Moreover, because of her forgery, Jeanette has lost her inheritance rights. As Jeanette began to make a scene, denying it, I elaborated further. Originally, Frank didn't want to leave his estate to Jeanette, so he had taken measures while he was alive. The process of disinheritance had already been filed at the court, meaning Jeanette could no longer inherit anything. The reasons are simple: Jeanette's failure to care for her husband, her routine verbal abuse, and her misappropriation and disposal of his property, to name a few. Since Jeanette denied it, I decided to play the recorded conversations from our home to the gathered relatives. I can't be bothered with taking care of my husband. It doesn't pay to be diligent. Since he doesn't have much time left, it doesn't matter what I do, no one will know or care. Once I get the money, I'll be with my boyfriend. Hearing Jeanette's words from the speaker, the relatives were disillusioned. What further cornered Jeanette was her forgery of the will. I informed her that this could lead to losing her inheritance rights in civil terms and even possible imprisonment in criminal terms. Then Jeanette exclaimed,
Frank's company exists. That's mine.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't become hers. The reason being that I had already completed the business succession, and the company, which was only a storefront operation at the time, flourished under my management. Using my past skills, I launched an e-commerce shop, which turned out to be a success, bringing the company onto a profitable track. Jeanette had always misunderstood that I was merely assisting Frank and had never imagined that I had taken over the management. Jeanette, if you want to take back the company, please save up the taxes you need to pay to the government and then let me know, I said spitefully. Then Jeanette claimed that even if she didn't receive the inheritance, Harrison would. So I turned to Harrison and said, Here are the divorce papers. You understand why I want a divorce, right? It's because you've always ignored Jeanette's harassment and never helped me. I'll be seeking compensation for the mental anguish I've suffered, no matter how small the amount. Also, I'll demand compensation from Jeanette for causing the breakdown of our marriage. Finally, Jeanette broke down, crying, I just want money, anything, and apologized deeply. No matter what Jeanette did, I had no intention of forgiving her. An apology wouldn't bring back my precious baby. With tears of frustration, I left the funeral. Later, the divorce was finalized, and I confirmed that the compensation from Harrison and Jeanette had been fully deposited. It seemed they used the money from selling their family home for the compensation. About a year later, Harrison appeared before me, holding a marriage registration form. I'm really sorry for hurting you. I only realized what true love was after I lost you. Please, let's try again. I've cut ties with my mother, so if it's okay with you, I'd like us to remarry, he said. Having gratitude towards Harrison's father, I couldn't dismiss him outright. Since Jeanette was the main cause of our divorce, I decided to give living together another try, on a trial basis. Months later, a new life arrived for us. Thus, we rebuilt our lives, and despite everything, we now live peacefully as a family of 3. Are you trying to ruin our wedding? It's not like that. I just wanted to say that you're spending too much money unnecessarily. I know you are poor, but Ryan is going to be the next president of the company, right? He doesn't need to worry about money. Even if he is the next president, this is too much. That's not true. I just wanted to see your happy face, and when I told Ryan that, he was willing to do anything I said. What? It seems he really likes you. He generously spent money whenever it was for you. Her words hit me like a stab with a knife. As I looked at her face in surprise, and she looked back at me with a sly smile.
You took advantage of his feelings for me.
Anger welled up inside me. To that, Jessica added another shocking statement. So what? If you're going to complain more, can you please leave? We don't need a low-educated, poor mother.
Please don't associate with us ever again.
Her words, filled with a sense of superiority, rapidly fueled my anger. I won't forgive this. Enjoy your triumph while it lasts. As she walked away looking down on me, I stared at her back, making a firm resolution to attend the reception. My name is Amy. I was widowed and now live with my son Ryan. My parents' home was poor, so I started working right after graduating from junior high. Later, I met and married a man who started his own company. Decades later, even when my husband's business stabilized and we had more financial freedom, my habit of saving remained, and I still live that way today. Neither my husband nor Ryan ever spoke ill of my frugality. Instead, they accepted it and joined me in being economical. Ryan, with his generous nature, even now as a working adult, accepts my frugality without complaint. After my husband passed away, the company is now led by my brother-in-law, Dylan, as the president. Ryan works there and is a candidate for the next president. Despite this, he hasn't let it go to his head and continues to live as usual. He, whom I raised alone after my husband's death, is my pride and joy. Sometimes I worry that he's too considerate and putting himself under strain, but his kindness is also something I'm proud of. Since working for the company, he has become even more independent, and recently he has become a very reliable man. So, when he told me he had a girlfriend, I felt a bit lonely, but I was happy enough to genuinely wish them well.
She was introduced to me by a friend, and she's really a great person.
He spoke with joy, and I smiled back.
I want to start a family soon to give Mom peace of mind. That's why I'm thinking about marrying my girlfriend.
Oh, thank you. But you haven't been together that long, right? Don't rush into marriage just because you're worried about me. It's your life, Ryan, make sure you make the decision for yourself. It's heartwarming to know he cares about me. But I didn't want him to choose his life partner just to reassure his mother. However, knowing that he has a girlfriend, seeing how happy he is, and above all, realizing how much he thinks of me, warms my heart. I thought to myself how lucky I am to have him. 6 months after hearing about his girlfriend, they seemed really serious about marriage, and he said she would be coming to our house. Though he had spoken about his girlfriend Jessica before, this would be my first time meeting her. I was looking forward to meeting Jessica, who might become his wife.
Amy, is it true you didn't go to college? And yet you managed to raise such a fine child as Ryan.
This was said by Jessica after we introduced ourselves and chatted a bit, while Ryan had stepped away from the table. She looked at me with a provocative gaze.
Yes. He has really grown up to be a fine young man.
I barely managed to reply, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of discomfort from her words. Though she seemed to be praising him, I felt there was a mocking tone towards me.
Fine, huh? You don't hold back on the praise. Usually, people are more modest. Oh, maybe you don't know these common social norms, not having gone to college. What? Sorry, I was just wondering. It's really amazing, though. Raising a child in a fatherless home, I could never do that.
Her words said one thing, but her mouth was slightly smirking.
What were you two talking about?
When he returned and asked, she promptly replied.
We were just talking about how amazing Amy is for raising such a wonderful person like you. I really respect Amy.
She said this with a smile at me. But I felt a thorn in her words and couldn't help feeling uneasy.
That's right. He is going to be the next president, isn't he?
The conversation shifted to the future of the two of them, and inevitably to his upcoming promotion. Jessica seemed captivated by the idea of he becoming the next president. In contrast, he responded calmly.
It's just because my uncle is the president, and that's what people say. I'm still inexperienced and need to study and grow more. It's Dad's company, so I can't take over halfway and let it fail.
What?
But you'll become the president eventually, right?
She asked, a bit flustered.
I'll work hard to make that happen.
He replied with a smile, but she seemed somewhat unsatisfied.
Before talking about being president, I need to get promoted first. The responsibilities vary with each position, and I need to understand those roles too.
When I gave this advice, he nodded firmly. Her eyes sparkled again.
When you get promoted, your salary will increase, right? Since you're talked about as the next president, I guess your income will keep getting better.
Her interest seemed piqued by words like next president and salary. The discomfort I felt towards her remained even after she left.
Hey, I hate to say this, but do you think Jessica is marrying you for your money? She seemed really interested in your salary and the talk of you becoming the next president.
I couldn't help but ask him. It's his life and his family. I may not have a right to interfere, but I couldn't stay silent, considering his happiness. But Ryan denied it.
I don't think so. She is concerned about money because she plans to manage our finances after we get married. Finances are important in marriage.
Oh, so you two have talked it over.
Yeah. She said she would manage our finances after we marry. She's always been responsible, so it'll be fine.
If that's the case.
Mom, I'm 28 now. I'm an adult, so don't worry about me that much.
His smile swept away my worries. Seeing his expression, I came to a realization. Maybe I was just feeling something like jealousy towards her. Is this how a mother feels when her son is getting married? That thought strangely made sense to me. But I would later realize that this idea was a mistake. A year after meeting Jessica, their wedding is today. I don't know any details about the wedding. She asked me not to interfere too much. Indeed, the wedding is about the two of them, and it's an important event for their future married life. I decided to quietly watch over them and looked forward to this day. But, when I arrived at the venue, I was so surprised that I was rooted to the spot. Because the rented venue was decorated so lavishly, it was beyond what ordinary people could afford. In the waiting room, there was a quiz corner where guests could guess the color of the dress Jessica would wear for her dress change. I had seen such features in weddings before, but there was one clear difference this time. There were 2 dress changes, and the dresses were in 2 different colors. Furthermore, the menu listed ingredients that were extravagantly high-end. Even the entertainment included a professional magician. I had attended many weddings, but this was the first time I saw one so luxurious and obviously expensive. I never imagined experiencing this at my own son's wedding. It was just too much. Feeling anxious and worried about their wedding, I decided I had to talk to Ryan and headed to their waiting room. Then I saw Dylan and Jessica. She was humbly and politely responding to Dylan's congratulations.
Thank you so much. Please continue to look after him. I'll do my best to support him too.
Of course. We have high hopes for him. I'm counting on you as well.
Yes, I'll do my utmost.
As she smiled at me, Jessica's expression turned scornful in an instant. Feeling uneasy, I hurried over to her. Then I asked about the situation.
Jessica, it's been a while. You told me not to interfere too much, so I've been quiet, but isn't this too extravagant? 1 dress change is enough. The wedding should be more modest.
While I was flustered, she looked relaxed and unapologetically replied, "It's already decided. Bringing it up now is troublesome." My mind went blank, unable to find words. She then looked at me with the same provocative eyes as when we first met.
Are you trying to ruin our wedding? It's not like that. I just wanted to say that you're spending too much money unnecessarily. I know you are poor, but Ryan is going to be the next president, right? He doesn't need to worry about money. Even if he is the next president, this is too much.
That's not true.
I just wanted to see your happy face, and when I told him that, he was willing to do anything I said. What?
It seems he really likes you.
He generously spent money whenever it was for you.
Her words hit me like a stab with a knife. Shocked, I looked at her face, and she was giving me a disdainful look.
You took advantage of his feelings for me.
Anger welled up inside me. To that, she added another shocking statement. So what? If you're going to complain more, can you please leave? We don't need a low-educated, poor mother. Please don't associate with us ever again. Her words, filled with a sense of superiority, rapidly fueled my anger. I won't forgive this. Enjoy your triumph while it lasts. I, seething with anger but resolute, stared at her back as she walked away, looking down on me, and then I joined the reception.
May I now have Amy, the mother of the groom, come forward?
The MC announced, guiding me to the microphone. I knew I had to give a speech, as Ryan had informed me beforehand, but it seemed Jessica was unaware. The situation was different from what I had imagined. Jessica, who had told me to leave, was now silently exuding a disgruntled aura as I, who she told to leave, was about to give a speech. Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate the marriage of Ryan and Jessica. Ryan and I have always supported each other throughout our lives. I began my speech, sharing my thoughts about Ryan. After narrating old episodes, I continued. However, it seems that from today, I must let go of him. Therefore, I am firing him. The room erupted in murmurs. Dylan, along with other company attendees, looked shocked and confused. The noise in the room grew louder. Among them, Jessica was the first to speak out.
Fired? What are you talking about? Amy, who isn't even part of the company, can't make such decisions. You should think before you speak. Even as a mother, there are limits.
Jessica, what are you saying?
I am firing Ryan. You said you didn't need a low-educated, poor me, and told me to never associate with you again. That's...
Moreover, it seems you were only after his money.
And Ryan, choosing someone like you, I can't trust him anymore. That's why I am firing him.
My words intensified the murmurs in the room. Jessica, her harsh words exposed, turned red-faced. Ryan, glaring at her, questioned.
What do you mean a low-educated, poor mom is unnecessary? Did you say that to Mom? And about being after money. It's fine, isn't it? We're going to live together. We don't need your mom, who has neither education nor money. Even if she says that, she can't fire you. Mom is the chairperson of my company. What?
Her face, which was red, now turned pale upon hearing his words. In a clearly panicked tone, she responded.
But, you said she didn't go to college. How can someone like that be a chairperson? That's the truth. The company was started by Dad. Mom has been involved since its foundation. Now, she understands the company more than anyone and holds the real executive power. Why didn't you tell me such important things earlier? If you had, none of this would have happened.
Instead of apologizing, she began blaming him. But he looked at her with disdain.
I plan to tell you about the company's details eventually. But now, there's no need. The marriage is off, so there's no need to explain anymore. What? What do you mean the marriage is off? It's obvious. I can't marry you, who looks down on Mom and is only after money. The wedding is cancelled.
His voice carried an air of authority. Jessica, realizing the gravity of the situation, suddenly turned to me, desperately seeking support.
Please forgive me, Amy. I didn't know you were the chairperson, and I was terribly rude. I won't belittle you anymore.
She said, but of course, I had no intention of forgiving her.
That's impossible. You mean you would have continued to belittle me if I weren't the chairperson? I can't be family with someone who can't respect others and whose hobby is squandering money. Goodbye.
With that, I started to leave the venue. Following me, Dylan stood up, and then the other attendees began to prepare to leave.
Wait, please don't go, everyone!
She screamed, but no one even looked at her with sympathy. My relatives expressed relief that he hadn't married such a person, and Jessica's relatives looked utterly disgusted. Her friends, who had been condescending thinking she would become a CEO's wife, were also displeased with her recent attitude and quickly began to leave. Everyone left Jessica standing there, stunned. Ryan and I returned the wedding gifts, apologizing to the guests as we saw them off. After everyone had left, he muttered apologetically. "Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to reassure you, but instead, it turned out we can't even work together anymore. That's why I told you not to worry about me so much. And about the firing, that's no longer happening." "Eh?" "I said I couldn't trust you who choose a partner only after money. That's why I was going to fire you. But now that the marriage with Jessica is off, I won't fire you." He looked perplexed by my words. "Thank you, Mom. I'll work even harder from now on. Your happiness is what matters most to me." I gently patted his back. Later, he officially broke off the engagement with Jessica, and they decided to split the wedding costs. Jessica had assumed Ryan would pay for the entire wedding and keep the gifts from her attendees for herself. Unable to pay her credit card bills for the esthetician, beauty salon, and other expenses, she ended up in debt. She, already unemployed and without money, hastily tried to marry for money again, but her next partner turned out to be a marriage scammer, further increasing her debt. Now, her whereabouts are unknown. Meanwhile, our family bond strengthened even more after this incident. Ryan seemed to respect me more than ever, now focusing on work rather than marriage to reassure me. Thanks to his dedication, the company. Recently, the president of a company we've long done business with introduced his daughter to Ryan. I've worked with his daughter a few times. Ryan seems quite interested in this new acquaintance. It looks like a wonderful meeting for him, who has now fully grown into a fine man, and I'm excited for him.